Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Joining us from around the world. My name is 𝘆𝗵𝗁, and on behalf of the entire team at CreativeBits.ai, I want to thank you for joining our webinar, Winning with AI, Strategy that Drives Results in Enterprise Settings. We all know AI is the biggest topic in business today. It's a priority in every boardroom. But the critical challenge isn't just talking about AI, it's building and executing a strategy that delivers real, tangible results. Our goal over the next 45 minutes to 1 hour is to provide a practical playbook to help you do just that. Our main agenda will focus on AI strategy for enterprises and the 3 foundational pillars, that is scalable data strategy, adaptive AI governance, and culture of innovation. And today, we are thrilled to have 2 exceptional leaders, 𝗪𝗲𝗹𝗹, the CEO of CreativeBits.ai, and 𝘆𝚠𝘂'𝗹𝗹, a strategic mentor, CreativeBits.ai, to guide us through this complex topic. The webinar was pre-recorded and edited this week, and 𝘆𝚠 and 𝗪𝗲𝗹 are present here to take your questions live. We want this session to be as interactive as possible, so please use the Q&A feature in your Teams window to submit your questions throughout this presentation. We have reserved time at the end to address them. Now let's dive in. I will hand over the floor to our first presenter to take over. 𝗪𝗲𝗹, take over, the stage is yours.
Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this chapter of From Hype to Reality, how to build AI that actually works for your enterprise. This webinar is being recorded between 𝘆𝚠 and myself, 𝗪𝗲𝗹𝗹. And I'm from CreativeBits.ai, and I've always considered 𝘆𝚠 as my mentor, and he's been gracious enough to give his mentorship and his strategic thought process to CreativeBits.ai. He's been in the trenches, turning AI ideas into real working solutions, and not just talking about them. And that's where I think the strategic thought process comes across, because it's not about just theoretical discussions, but it's more about actual practical implementation. That's where I've seen 𝘆𝚠 really shine in all the projects that he has taken up in the past. So 𝘆𝚠, over to you.
Thank you, 𝗪𝗲𝗹. Happy to be here. Thanks for everyone for joining. Yes, it's an exciting time. I think it's really important to be practical, deliver tangible results. I know those are buzzwords, but people react to things they can see, they can feel, things that are relevant. And AI is no exception. In fact, I believe with AI, you can get to the tangible results quicker than in the past. But there are specific approaches and shifts in mentality and mindsets that are required.
Perfect. And that's why, the AI buzzword, it's almost become a cliche to call it from hype to reality, because there is actually a lot of that in the industry. And obviously, there are lots of discussion around how to make it practically applicable in various domains, especially in the enterprises. Now, we have seen a lot of these strategic sessions. We have attended many of them, but what we really have we're coming here with is that when there are real enterprise constraints, which is the reality, and there are real budget constraints, there are real risk managements, there's stakeholders, compliance, and all of that coming together, making something like AI, which is, of course, brings about a lot of efficiencies, but implementing them have its own challenges. So with that, I think we'll get started. 𝘆𝚠?
Excellent. Yeah, let's jump right into it.
And as all the attendees, please feel free to drop in questions as we are talking about our thought process. And as we're going across, we'll weave them in naturally, or we'll take them all in the end. So let's do a reality check. 𝘆𝚠, basically, the elephant in the room is every enterprise they are talking about in the boardrooms, AI strategy. How do we use AI? What are the best use cases of AI? But when you really dig in your experience, what are they really asking for?
I think what they're seeing is opportunities to perform functions and run processes at a scale never before seen, right? So, those processes relate to revenue generation, risk mitigation, operational efficiency, especially in the beginning. We're talking about how do we do things better at a higher scale. Eventually, we get to how do we do things we didn't think we could do. But right now, it is really just taking advantage of opportunities at a scale that is there for us.
Yeah, and so perfectly said, because basically what it means is it's about the business pain points and opportunities, and not really about the technical excitement. It's a new toy, of course, and everyone wants to talk about it. But when it comes to real implementation, it's the how can that technology really help us resolve certain pain points is what they're trying to get to, right?
Absolutely. And with opportunities comes risks and challenges. And again, going back to scale, those risks and those challenges, some of them have always been here, but they're going to be magnified. They're going to be amplified by us trying to open up opportunities in AI. So, what was a small issue in, let's say, a data strategy when humans were consuming the data becomes much larger when you almost have an infinite amount of processes consuming this.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. And that's a great way to put it, because the scale at which AI works, it amplifies everything, the issues or the efficiencies. And I do know, and I got an early access to the deck that you had put together, your thought process around it, that you're talking about bringing it all down to 3 foundational areas. Can you please break those down for the audience?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it starts with having clarity on how to achieve business outcomes along the lines of, as I said, revenue, risk mitigation, and efficiencies. And in doing that, how do you mitigate those risks that are now amplified? So I look at it as 3 strong pillars. Starts with a scalable data strategy. So growth doesn't break the foundation you may have. And historically, that foundation hasn't been that solid to begin with. Then an adaptive AI governance. We're talking about disciplined but flexible, right? We're not looking to suppress innovation or slow down. We're actually looking to accelerate in a way that we can deliver value in a sustainable way, because delivering value in a short-term time frame doesn't do anyone any good. And the last piece is establishing a culture of innovation. If we learned nothing over the last 2 years, we've learned how quickly this stuff changes. So just building something to address today's problems and today's landscapes is going to be short-lived. So you have to have a mechanism, have a team, have a culture that allows you to keep your finger on the pulse of these ever-evolving landscapes. Going back to, it does start with data. AI is elegant, it's exciting, but without data, it falls short. Your returns are going to be accelerated in the wrong direction if you don't have that sound data strategy.
Correct. And so with that, I think we should start peeling the onion here and get more in depth about what do you really mean by the data strategy? And I'm sure, everyone is in the industry. They're talking about data being king now, which we do not disagree with. But that's the first wall that the C-levels are hitting. Isn't that correct?
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, and, data has had its challenges historically. Data strategies, business intelligence strategies, data analytics strategies have fallen short because of these challenges. A lot of times, bloated architectures way too complicated. You hear the term modern data stack, and you're talking about stitching together almost what feels like an infinite amount of processes and libraries and modules and platforms. That gets overly complicated. That's not going to adapt well. I shouldn't say the advent, the ever existence of unstructured data that was essentially inaccessible up until the past few years. So those gaps can now be filled. And then historically, again, it goes back to culture, siloed thinking, cultural misalignment, where you either had the Wild West with the front office running everything in a chaotic fashion. And again, we're here for the business. We want to stay in tune with business use cases, but the front office generally gets ahead of things. Or you go the other way, and then you have a heavy-handed IT governance that is just suppressing any innovation, any advancements. Those approaches left poor data quality, very low data literacy. People just didn't understand what the data was. They couldn't discover it. And systems were built without the proper context, either built by engineers who didn't engage enough with the front office. And you're going to see with AI, without context, it's going to fall very short.
Totally. And yeah, and we will come back to the topics, very interesting topics of governance and the culture part that you touched upon. But staying on data is almost like garbage in, garbage out. Has become messy data in, the messier AI out, right? So that's becoming kind of the adage that everyone is kind of going with. What's the solution out of it?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. You can now use AI to improve your data governance. You can instill data quality practices on a proactive inference basis. Historically, data strategies fell short, and it was an indictment on the front-end strategy, the front-end reports, when it was really the data governance fell short because it had to be so reactive. You can only write so many rules and react to when new rules come. So with AI, you actually can accelerate and improve your data governance, which then leads to better insights, which is then going to fuel more demand for more data.
Yeah. So there's this virtuous cycle basically that you're talking about, which is happening. But how do you start, and how does it start look like?
First and foremost, you have to start with the appropriate business use case, right? It's got to be relevant, somewhat critical where it's important. Again, it's relevant, but not mission critical because you're going to be doing a lot of experimenting. You take what we historically called a thin slice approach, but you anchor that in the use case, which means you shift right to understand the use case, then shift left as engineers and project managers have always done to instill the disciplines and the key governance areas, quality, observability, again, going back to context, just enough to support that specific outcome. In doing that, you're going to discover the risks you didn't think about. You're going to understand if you mitigated the risks you did think about, and you're doing it in the context, always keeping an eye on business value delivery.
Totally. And with that, I think let's shift gears into the governance piece, because we don't want governance to kill innovation, and the other way around as well. And that feels like, there's always good intentions based on someone's vantage point, but then we don't want these good intentions to go and die. So when you're balancing the responsible AI with actually building something that can be shipped, that's practical, feasible, and has market value, how do you get to that balance, and how do you optimize the actions to be taken?
That's the perfect word, balance, right? We live in a gray area. We have to figure out how to succeed in the gray area. We all wish life and our careers were black and white, but they just aren't, right? So I use the term adaptive governance, meaning you start with the disciplines that you're striving for, but they have to adapt as the business adapts. What's interesting is the first thing I learned is that you have to understand the risks that were there have always been there. A lot of those are related to SaaS products, the SOC type 2 type risk mitigation, versus those risks that are being introduced in a unique fashion by AI, uncontrolled LLM usage, prompt injection, the fact that AI is here embedded in some of these applications that management isn't even aware of because it just came out with the next release, right? So you just simply can't block all these tools. You have to be able to discover them intelligently and govern them surgically. That means performing this governance in the context of the users, in the context of the business value that they're being performed. You just can't take a broad stroke and redact everything. But obviously, you do need to redact certain information, the confidential information. In order to get to that early, you have to build cross-functional teams from legal to engineering and have them talking day one. Again, in the context of the business case. So if you anchor it in the context of the business case, everyone has the opportunity to opine on what their concerns are. And then you selectively pick the concerns that you want to try to address through your first release. That's that thin slice approach. And then you keep building on it.
Building on it. Correct. And for our attendees, if you have any example to share that can visualize for them, how do you have this adaptive governance built into the system for embedded AI or SaaS apps or whichever way based on your experience? If you can provide that example, that would be awesome.
Sure. Let's take what we've all seen and what we're feeling in our real lives, customer service, right? AI assisting customer service, right? So first thing you do is that's your use case. So you bring all these other team members, legal, compliance, front office, engineering, operations, accounting, and I'm going to get into why that's so important. And you decide what is the first thing you want to do. Is it just answering someone who calls a phone? Is it responding to the first couple of questions? The first thing that comes up from security is, well, you're dealing with a customer. How are we going to ensure that we're locking down the customer data, especially in the early stages of development training? AI has offered the opportunity to build synthetic data at scale that you can use during your training. And going back to that virtuous cycle again. What's the other concern that comes up? The cost of this, the tokenization and consumption cost of LLM integrations. So you start to figure out, well, how do we track and monitor the costs as we're using it in this thin slice, which is pretty well bounded. It's not going to get out of control. With those controls, with the synthetic data, you can put it in a sandbox. You can tighten that sandbox in the beginning. And then as people gain comfort, as those controls are being well understood, you just loosen it up. And then as you're loosening it up, you're still assessing what is the acceptance criteria, functional and non-functional. Are these outcomes accurate? Is there any levels of bias? Again, that's a new risk that AI brought in that we didn't truly have to deal with. And then the one that you always bring up, usability. How is the user experience? And user experience isn't UI. They're two different things. Once you're doing that, again, in that thin slice, in the context of the business value delivery, then all of a sudden people's comfort get level from legal to front office, and you're ready to keep building on that.
Yeah, and so many examples, in terms of how in the past the various silos in an organization, how they interact is basically completely the opposite of how they should interact. So, for example, the IT governance should enable speed, not prevent it. And
Absolutely.
the moment there is that hindrance caused by good intentions once again, but not having the patience or the empathy to work with the other side, that's where I think that tussle kind of becomes unproductive. And that has to be avoided. So somehow we have to find that balance to, again, coming back to balance, right? Let's enable speed, not prevent it, and find the right mix of doing things together.
Oh, without a doubt. And those are two great words, balance
Yeah.
again and empathy,
Empathy.
right?
Yeah.
It comes down to how do you break that silo thinking, right?
Correct.
How does a data science team build a very effective model, but in such a way that it can't be maintained by the operations team? Or
Perfect.
how
Yeah.
does an operations team instill so many practices and disciplines that it hinders the innovation done by data engineers? Or even worse, how do both teams build this and then bring in the build business stakeholders, and it's not applicable to what they do? Early and often, early, often, and focused. Bring the parties together. Day one, I've been in positions where, as an engineer, I had to read legal contracts before they were signed because they made reference to RAG. There wasn't a compliance or legal person in the room that understood what RAG was in the context of AI. That is just an example of an engineer that is usually brought in months after the contract is being reviewed, now having to be brought in day one. Once you get people working together, once you understand everyone's concerns, what gets them out of bed in the morning, what keeps them up at night, that's where that empathy starts coming in. That's where people are willing to loosen up a little bit because they know they're going to be involved. And if something goes wrong, they're going to see it.
Yeah.
People stay up at night worried because they feel there is something going on that they don't know about.
Yeah. And, it's so refreshing to sometimes see when everyone is working hand in hand and trying to go towards a common objective. I've been a part of such events where that never happened, and all it leads to is the all the negative emotions, the animosity that builds up. I think AI has come in at the point where everyone is kind of coming together. Everyone knows we need it. We need to implement it in the right way. Then and they are kind of willing to take a step back because it's almost like a reset. Was there AI governance ever? No. But now that everyone is thinking about it, they're thinking about it in a way where, hey, we are a team. Let's work together for the common good. And it's a great segue what you mentioned, right? It's a great segue into our next topic, or the third pillar that you had mentioned, team culture. How do you build it the right way? Because doesn't matter what all technology you use in the world, if you do not have the right team dynamics, you're going to fail. Would you agree?
Oh, without a doubt. We've always talked about it. Most of our problems, they're not really technology problems. They're
Yeah.
not impossible to solve, but guess what? They are multidimensional. And in order to understand those dimensions, you need to bring different people with different perspectives. That's the only way this is going to happen. This started out in the cloud, right? When engineers had to start to work with infrastructure and security. Now it's being expanded into the business and deep into the business, not just the front office, but legal compliance, as I mentioned. You need to be able to instill those disciplines in the context of the business value, because that's how it's going to be sustainable. And here's the added benefit that most people don't understand or don't appreciate, or maybe don't want to appreciate.
Yeah.
When you're working with different people from different perspectives who have different concerns and different motivations, that can explain those things to you, you're going to learn.
Yeah.
And guess what? As you explain those things to them, they're going to learn. So now I'm not learning from just one or two engineers around me. I'm learning from 10 people across the entire business. I'll sign up for that every day, right? Because now my learning curve just went from relatively flat and slow to almost a 90-degree. That's fantastic. That will help the culture exponentially.
Yeah, and it brings to mind so many other yeah, the collaboration that we have started to see in the industry. Um, as an AI solution provider, AI consulting, professional development provider, what we have seen is there is a different now a very different discussion with the clients or potential clients where the clients are coming in with a very open mind uh, to ask us to help solve their problems because they know their problems the most and they are willing to share. And we have come across so many examples where the SMEs they become like the SMEs to the whole solution, and we become the solution provider in the true sense of things. And it and whenever the clients work in that manner, it's those projects tend to be delivered faster and have much higher success rate. And where I'm going with that is I wanted to ask you, what does in an enterprise a winning team really look like going forward?
Going to beat a dead horse, multidimensional, multifunctional.
Uh-huh.
You touch upon it. Culture of empathy, right? Once you get those disciplines and perspectives together, you're not going to succeed without mutual empathy. Experimentation, embracing experimentation, which means embracing failure. That's a tough thing to go through, but it's the only way through. It's the only path to sustainable success. In order to truly experiment, you need to establish a pipeline of innovation. Because what are you experimenting if you're experimenting on what you already know? That's not an experiment. So you need to set up strategic partnerships who could set up and introduce platforms that are evolving with these technology and business landscapes. So, and first and foremost, leadership comes in, right? Leadership sets the tone. They come in, they have to change the dynamic by instilling that cross-disciplined collaboration. They have to instill that culture of empathy. They have to embrace, nurture, cultivate innovation. And no use doing that if you can't experiment. So
I totally agree.
That's how they work. And then the last piece is you have to be elastic. I mean, we learned this with the cloud, right? Systems run a lot better when they're truly elastic. They can go up and down based off of when needed. We have to build our teams the same way. We have to be able to bring subject matter experts when we need them. We need to have people who are willing to mentor and be mentored. They have to be able to learn from those specialists. They need to be able to pivot what they thought they were doing to align better with those specialists, and then take over what the specialist was trying to tell us in the long term. That elasticity, along with the culture, that's a recipe for success.
Perfect. Yeah. So going back a few years when we were working at the same place, the culture piece, I always appreciated how you were so open to experimenting in a safe manner. Of course, we cannot be all in just experimenting without a given without any way to any boundaries. So experimentation is a great part of culture. Then you talked about leadership. Of course, top down. If there's a top down approach, and a push in the enterprises to instill those dynamics, that's great. And this term that you just mentioned, it's actually mind blowing about having elastic resources. So basically, not just the technology, even people need to be elastic. So that's a great twist. I think we should get into in depth of that maybe at some other time and spin up more discussions around it, because that's a concept which may be alien to many at this point in time. But considering that we kind of touched upon the team and culture, why don't we now talk about, after these three foundational pillars, let's talk about what really works. And it's more a tactical approach, because all of these foundational pillars take time to build. In terms of getting tactical, and if someone is asking you, I want to understand what's a quick way to get there, what are you seeing that is working very well at this time?
Yeah, this is
across
the
the
interesting
industry?
stuff, right? A lot of
Yeah.
what we talked about, a little abstract, a little nuanced, but this is a little more tangible. So,
Yeah.
if we're talking about scale, who runs into a lot of scale problems? Legal departments. They
Yeah.
are inundated with contracts, documents, statutes, whatever it is. I'm not a lawyer. One of the earlier advancements I saw was around what I call advanced document processing. And what that is the ability to contextualize, there's that word again, contextualize any document so that it is brought into an ability to be able to consume the information in that document relevant to what the legal team or compliance team is looking at to scale, right? That has always been, we've dealt with loading structured data that had its own problems, batch real time, but unstructured data was always a challenge because we lacked the contextualization of those documents. So what's a legal entity? What's a person? What's a date? What does that date mean? How is it relevant to the business process? Now that frees up the lawyers to be able to now think about the problem they're trying to solve when the problem isn't trying to get your handle on the data. The problem should be what's the legal challenge or what's the legal opportunity for the firm.
Yeah. And that basically sounds that's where the real ROI stays or can be extracted.
Yeah, without a doubt. Hey, first and foremost, it's measurable, right? You can almost track. I mean, it's not 100% quantifiable, but you can almost track. Well, we used to go through 10 documents a month. Now we're going through 3,000, right? And it doesn't, this is the other beauty. That use case doesn't significantly change the existing workflow. The lawyers are just getting information that they've wanted and tried to get to in a quicker and more absorbable way. They don't have to change their behavior, except maybe to think quicker, which is what they all want to do. So going back to scale again, it allows the entire team to be more productive and very much more accurate at a much higher scale.
Totally. And we talked about the happy path. Now let's talk about things that you think don't work and maybe some principles behind why they don't work.
Yeah, there's what I call two flavors, right? One is not understanding the right fit, using AI for the sake of using AI, or using AI because the engineer thinks, oh, this is going to look good in my resume. This is really exciting. I love talking about it. And then finding out later that there's no use case. So again, anchoring it, grounding it in the business use case always. The next is not understanding what is needed for sustainable value. So once you have the use case and you figure out how to deliver value, that value has to be sustainable. And sustainability means it's got to be compliant, it's got to be cost effective, it's got to be maintainable, it's got to be extensible. So the first change that goes in can't bring the whole thing down to its knees. So when you look at, I've seen both of those things happen, and both of those things result in failure when you're either not rooting it in the right use case, or you're just worried about addressing that use case and it's very short-lived.
So in short, what you're saying is, even with AI, human research still matters.
Yeah, without a doubt. You have to, again, it has to be relevant. AI will allow you to gain the context quickly, but it's still upon us to understand the context. We're not there yet where artificial intelligence will do that for you.
Right. Yeah, and it's so prevalent now that AI using vibe code, people using vibe coding and churning out systems. Okay, that's a good, that could generate them revenue, but think about it. If there's bugs, defects, enhancements, if you do not really understand the code, or if you haven't followed the software engineering principles, uh, that sustainability that you talked about won't be there. And and that's where, yeah, the human in the loop, pre-system and proposed system are both important. Um, and with that, um, what are the patterns that you're seeing, um, instead of just use cases? What are the patterns that you see that can determine successful implementation?
Sure. Start small, then worry about scale. Don't ignore scale. You know it's coming if you've succeeded, but that's the right problem to have. But you have to start small. Pick one slice across one or two relevant use cases. Do those things very well. Your acceptance criteria in your definition of very well is multidimensional. Measure everything, not just the technical functionality. Obviously, that's important. If it doesn't solve the business problem, no one's going to care. But you have to be able to measure, how secure is this? How supportable is this? How cost effective is this? Does this expose us to any legal grounds? It often comes down to three things. I've always oversimplified things. Every decision we make as system engineers, project managers, comes down to, do we want to add more depth to an existing domain that we're in? Do we want to add breadth and go outside to a new domain, right? Or do we want to go back and harden and solidify what it is we just did so that it's sustainable? And if you just look at your decisions in those three things, you'll always understand what it is you're about to do. Do I want to add another calculation to the same front office, or do I want to take some of the principles and apply it to operations? Or do I want to go back and say, listen, our logging isn't that good. We don't have proper proactive notifications. This isn't wired up to be properly supported. You just keep cycling through those three decisions in small, manageable pieces, gradually moving forward. When you fail, guess what? You're going to fail small. That's fine. But you're moving ahead. You're making progress. We hear the term continuous improvement, and that's just not a buzzword. That's real when you have the right mindset.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I have to look at the the clock also, and I like all things. Even this conversation needs to, is reaching its closing point. But I wanted to ask you, Louis. This has been very interesting. But if your audience, if they had to walk out from this conversation, walk away from this conversation with one key takeaway, what do you think it is?
Recognize that this is a scale problem. These opportunities, these challenges have always been there. They're just going to be happening on much larger scale. Now, in order to harness that scale, shift right, keep an eye on the business problem. Don't worry about the technology. Bring in multiple perspectives so that you can instill the disciplines in the context of that business problem. And while you're solving the business problem, instilling the disciplines, be open to experimentation, embrace failure, and make sure you are set up for this to evolve as the landscapes evolve.
Perfect, perfect. And with that, I would just like to say for everyone who's listening in that if you want to continue this conversation or need help thinking through the specific situation that you are in, and this relates to that, please reach out. We do this day in and day out, and we'd love to help and learn along the way, and help you move from the cliche hype to reality. And with that, I would like to thank Louis for joining us, and I really hope that we kind of continue this conversation, because there is so much more depth in the philosophy that we would love to listen into in the upcoming maybe next couple of weeks, that when we get together and have another episode.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you had as much fun as I had. And best of luck out there, and have a good time doing it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Louis.
Thank you all.
Oh, that was quite a good presentation. Steve, kindly, maybe you can text a question on the Q&A part. So I've received several questions so far offline, and as the rest continue sending their questions, maybe I can read the ones that are here. Our first question is, are there ways to accelerate the thin slice approach to ensure that understanding is achieved?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned that in the beginning of the webinar. That's where there's another interesting aspect of AI. Through the use of GPTs or just the ability to flatten a learning curve of a technical or business domain, you're able to rifle through end-to-end processes in a somewhat automated fashion, right? It may not have all the disciplines you need, but we now have the mechanisms to either generate code much quickly, automate pipelines, data quality processes. We can generate context in ways we never had before. In the data governance world, we're able to create business glossaries, lineage, semantic layers, much quicker than we've done in the past, and also generating insight. Being able to translate natural language questions in a way that leverages the glossaries and leverages the semantic layers to be able to produce insights. We haven't had these tools. A lot of times the challenge is understanding if you're going down the right path, and what these AI-driven accelerants do is allow us to learn that much quickly.
Well, thank you for that. The other question is, what are some of the steps to address the security aspects specific to AI?
Yeah, this gets into the risks and challenges that AI has introduced that we haven't seen before. In fact, I think we've all read earlier this week, late last week, ChatGPT had to roll back portions of its GPT-5. And why was that? Part of it was a critical part of the adaptive AI strategy that we talked about around vulnerability testing. There are platforms out there that firms can partner with to run scans and vulnerability tests against OWASP vulnerabilities, things like prompt injection, data poisoning. These things can now be discovered because there's innovative platforms out there that allow us to do it. And when you see something as big as OpenAI have to roll back because of a concept that is part of the strategy that we just discussed, that's really, that says a lot about the way we're thinking. We're thinking about this the right way. We understand that there are risks that are going to be introduced that we've never had to deal with. So what's the first thing we have to do? Figure out how to scan for those vulnerabilities. It's really no different than the traditional penetration testing we did for websites. And it's just going to continue to evolve. We talked about, shadow AI detection, detecting it in an intelligent way and governing it in a surgical way. How do we redact data in the context, whether that's the context of the domain it's being used or the context of who's using it? There are certain parties that may have much higher, much broader entitlements that may not have to redact as much, where there are other parties that should. That context is very important.
Yeah, so rightly said. I'll basically piggyback on that and talk about, a couple of new domains of security which have really come up, and Louis touched upon them. And I feel like there is this concept about even model protection. I mean, we had never thought about it. The models are becoming more and more critical because that's all what your, the training, AI training is based on. And then if that gets tampered with, your whole workflow where AI is being implemented could be could lead to serious results, and therefore even the output monitoring of AI is another domain which people had not talked about before. Pre-AI, where the response, the system response had been very binary, whether this is expected to say yes or no, but what is the actual result is yes or no, or it was mathematical. But now there being this fuzziness in the output, it's really imperative to maybe work with the specialists in the industry to test your systems and work around it in a professional manner, because the results, the implications are serious, much more serious. So that's here. Yeah, so that's, I think, my 2 cents. Kelvin, back to you.
Well, thank you for that. So the final question is, why is pragmatic execution relevant to the culture of innovation?
Yeah, I think, Louis, this is completely your domain, because I've seen you working with your team and how that culture really gets appreciated, top down, bottom up, in both ways.
Yeah, there are principles that relate to traditional agile approaches. I use the term pragmatic because that's what it is. We have to be thoughtful. We have to be realistic. We have to be practical. If we're going to evolve, we can't be re-engineering every 5 years. We have to evolve gradually. So we need to have a shared understanding of where we're going to focus. What type of innovation are we going to introduce? We have to make sure that it's well-bounded, it's smaller, so that we could make changes that aren't completely disruptive, but move the platform forward. We have to optimize what in business sense is called opportunity costs. How do we give up one thing to do another? And you have to do that in a very practical way, and it often relates to small, manageable pieces. If you're able to make those changes in small, manageable sizes, you will be able to introduce innovation throughout the tenure of your career, throughout the tenure of your team, throughout the life cycle of your platform. So if you can't execute in a practical way, you're not going to be able to introduce innovation. It's going to be way too disruptive, way too risk-laden, and it's just not going to align with where you need to be.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I think this was a very good interaction between the team and the AI leaders, and we'll keep on doing more and more webinars. And I'd like to appreciate everyone who joined, and see you on the next webinar. Very soon we'll be hosting another one, a bigger one actually. And I would request everyone to join, invite your friends, invite your family members, invite your colleagues. And thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you all.